Gimel Amud Aleph. We're on page 3a, and we were learning about the laws of someone who's deaf but not mute, or someone who's mute but not deaf, and we spoke about the ability of Eldad. In the story here is really a story of that starts in the Chumash. The story here is the story of these two people that really were some type of a reincarnation from Eldad and Medad, and they were unable to speak, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu's the Moshe Rabbeinu of the generation, who's obviously connected to the original Moshe Rabbeinu, he is the one who's going to heal them, because they are the ones who sort of sinned against Moshe. So here you have Rebbe who's going to pray to Hashem to heal them.
Rabbi Smith?
Yes.
Did you check the Baal HaTurim? Did you get a chance?
I didn't. Did you pull it up?
Yes.
Oh.
It does say Elidon ben Kislon or whatever, and his brother Medad, he gives him another name, were the Nesiim for I'm not sure who it was. I think Binyamin and Ephraim or something.
So just remind me.
It also says that they were half brothers of Moshe. Interesting side note.
So if I look it up and I find this, what does this contradict what we said? Just remind me. How does it? What was the question basically? So let's say I'm going to look up this Baal HaTurim. So right. They were Nesiim.
Well, they were talking, and so why did they have to go to another Gilgal not to talk if right after Yeshua cursed them or whatever, they became Nesiim, is what I'm asking.
So the fact that they became Nesiim sounds like they didn't do anything wrong. Is that right. What you're saying? Sounds like they didn't do anything wrong, but it's not so convincing. I mean, it doesn't say that this was a terrible sin. They said something they shouldn't have. It doesn't say that, it's not exactly like a gossip where they spoke like Moshe did something wrong. So I get, it's not a very strong question. It's a question. Yeah. Okay, fine. So I guess we'll take a look. But the reason, do you understand what I'm saying? It's not like a very strong question, because it's not really a proof from there that it can't be that they would become the Nesiim if they did something. It's not exactly so. I mean, you could be a Nasi, you'd be just because they did something wrong and they did tshuva or whatever, it's considered on their level, maybe it wasn't appropriate or something,
Okay, I'm sorry to disturb.
No, you're not disturbing. No, I'm just saying, like, we'll take a look. I'm just trying to evaluate how strong of a contradiction it is, or if it is.
We can come back to it later.
But yeah, we'll take. I definitely wanted to take a look at that. And thank you for bringing it up. It's always good to bring it up. We'll have to, and that is very interesting that they became the Nesiim.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, definitely.
They were actually relatives.
And their relatives, but that doesn't really change anything whether they're relatives or not.
No, but it's interesting side note.
Yeah. But I guess what we could do as well is look up the other Mefarshim and see how do the commentaries explain Eldad and Medad, and with regard to how Yehoshua judged them versus how Moshe saw them. In other words, it might be dependent on how you interpret that story. It's not exactly a story that they don't really teach it to you in Cheder, that story.
No,
they don't really develop it. There must be a lot of commentaries on it. What exactly were Eldad and Medad doing? Was it wrong? Was it right? Were they humble and they didn't want to go and You know, they on the one hand, they didn't join the group, they stayed back. Was it because they were humble, so maybe they were holier than everyone else, or was it because they did something wrong? You know, so it definitely deserves some thought. And why did Yehoshua think that they were doing something terrible? And Moshe said, what do you care? Halavai, everyone should be Nevi'im, right? That was Moshe's answer.
Right.
So we need to understand the entire story there, really, to delve into this Balaturim as well, and then connect it with how the Mekubalim want to explain our Gemara. You know, so it's it deserves some research. Yeah, and in fact, if you want to do your essay on that, Harold, you know, that might be a nice thing to do. You could look into that. That might be a nice thing to write something up about. But definitely thank you for bringing it up. I'm just saying, I don't know if it's a very strong question. It's a good it's a question. You know, it's something to look into. Okay, so the Gemara that we finished, we basically mentioned that you learn from Leman Yishmu that regarding Hakel, a person who is deaf is exempt from Hakel, even if they're not mute. Even if they're not mute, but they're deaf, they're exempt from Hakel. And the Gemara said, and if they're exempt from Hakel, we learn that they should also be exempt from Re'iyah, from the obligation of going to the Beis Hamikdash and bringing the carbon Re'iyah, the Oilas Re'iyah, the burnt sacrifice called the Re'iyah. So they're going to be exempt because Hakel and Re'iyah are a Gzeira Shavah. There's a link between the two. And if someone's exempt from Hakel, they're exempt from Re'iyah. And we also said that Leman Yilamedu excludes someone who's mute. So someone who's mute is exempt from Hakel. They're also going to be exempt from Re'iyah. They're exempt from Hakel. Hakel is, again, that once every 7 years on the year after Shemitah, they do the Hakel, where the king would stand on a platform and read from the Torah, and it would be an inspirational event. And the Hakel, everyone came, but there were some exceptions. And even though the men, women, and children came, but there were exceptions. And one of them was a deaf person or a mute person. And the same thing would apply to the law of Re'iyah, that the deaf person and the mute person would be exempt from Re'iyah. And that because and basically because it says Leman Yilamedu, that in order that you teach, and someone who's mute can't teach, and they're basically exempt from both of these laws. Yes, Ezra.
So how do you take into account the person who, you might have discussed it already, someone who uses sign language? I mean, yeah, you're mute, but your hands are not, yet you're capable of teaching.
So the question would be, how do we adapt this law? How do we follow this law? Does this law change if they are able to teach? Is there, for example, nowadays they could type, and a noise would come out from a speaker, like a Siri or something. It could actually teach for them. So would this law still apply? That's an interesting question. And in your case, or your example, is sign language. We have come up with a way that mute people can teach. So would they still be excluded? Because it says Leman Yilamedu. And if the purpose is in order for them to teach what they saw, it would seem that they could teach it. So I'm not sure. That's a good question. Would this law change based on the practicality of today, that it doesn't apply to these type of mute people, because they could teach. And the whole purpose is we want them to teach. So if they're able to teach, then they're not really excluded. This is excluding someone who's not able to teach. And maybe there could be mute people that are unable to learn sign language. Someone who's in that category maybe would be exempt. So possibly this law would change. So it's definitely a good question, Ezra. If the law would change based on the fact that people could teach now. So it's Mitz Hashem. When we have the Beis Hamikdash, we shouldn't have this issue because everyone, of course, is going to be all healed. We won't have this problem. So it's not such a practical question anymore, but it was practical in the time of the first and second Beis Hamikdash, when they had, when they had the king, when they had the kings who would do the hakel. So yeah, interesting question. How do we do? Does it adapt? Would this law change? Okay, so now we're up to the next little piece of Gemara where it says Amar Reb Tanchum. So we're on page 3a, and we are let's see.
There's little numbers on the side.
Oh, you have numbers?
Number 3.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone else has the same book you have, Ben.
No, I'm copying.
That's good for you.
Whatever you sent from Safari. I copied.
Maybe some people have Safari. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it could be. Oh, I thought you had one of the Steinsaltz Hebrew.
Not yet. No, not yet.
Okay. Okay,
yeah, but
so
yeah, the lines are on Safaria. Each of the paragraphs has the number, as Ben says. Yeah, I'm using Safaria as well.
Oh, okay. So it seems we're about 25 lines from the top. So Amar Reb Tanchum. Tanchum says that Heiresh Beyoznai Achas, that a person who's deaf in one ear is pater min ha're'iyah, is exempt from re'iyah, from bringing the carbon re'iyah or going to the Beis Hamikdash or both. He's exempt because he's deaf in one ear. Shenemar, as it says, ba'ozneihem. It says regarding the law of Hakel that the king is supposed to read from the Torah and present the teachings in their ears, in the people's ears. So since it uses the plural, ba'ozneihem, so Reb Tanchum says that means that they need both ears because it's plural. And if the law is such by Hakel, then the same law will apply to Re'iyah. That's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara asks some questions on this. V'hai b'ozneihem, this ba'ozneihem, mi boile ba'ozneihem dechulu Yisrael. This was needed for the ozneihem of all of Klal Yisrael, that it's talking about many people. It's not talking about one person, and it's using a plural, saying ears, which would mean you need to be able to hear with both ears. It's talking to a large group of people. It's talking to the whole Klal Yisrael. So it's ba'ozneihem the whole Yisrael. The Chulu Yisrael. So the Gemara is not satisfied with Reb Tanchum's way of learning that you need to be able to hear from both ears, because it says ba'ozneihem. Ba'ozneihem is not really proving that. So the Gemara answers it is, because hahu mi neged kol Yisrael now. That we can learn from when it says opposite all of Israel. We understand that that all of Israel has to hear it. And when it says ozneihem, it's emphasizing that it has to be with two ears. So the Gemara says that's not so simple to say that. Imi neged kol Yisrael. If it just said mi neged kol Yisrael, opposite all of Israel, hava amina, I would have thought to say that aval gav deloi shami, even if someone doesn't hear, it's good enough as long as he said it opposite them. He said it. They're there. He said it. That should be good enough. So kasav rachmana b'ozneihem v'hu deshami. So the Torah says b'ozneihem that they need to hear the king reciting everything, and V'hu and therefore Oznehem is really emphasizing that everyone needs to hear, and that's why it's in plural. And you don't have an extra word to teach your innovation that you want to say a person who's deaf in one ear is going to be exempt. You can't use that word for that, because that word is meant for the plural for all of Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara answers, Ahu milaman yishmu nafka. That is learned from Laman Yishmu, that because it says Laman Yishmu, we learn from there that they have to hear it. And this that it says B'yoz Nehem is adding another additional point that would be, what's the additional point? That you need to hear it with both ears. You need to be capable of hearing it with both ears. And if a person is deaf in one ear, they would be exempt from Hakel, which would automatically mean that they're exempt from Re'iyah, which is the topic of our discussion, is more Re'iyah, not Hakel. Hakel is a law, once every 7 years. The Re'iyah is a law 3 times a year, every single year. So the law of Re'iyah is what our whole tractate is about. And so the Chagiga, the Re'iyah, the holiday sacrifices and obligations. So this is the Rav Tanchum says, you see from here that they need a person who's deaf in one ear would be exempt. I did want to mention that I touched on yesterday a Igros Moshe, an argument between, or a discussion between, where Moshe has a discussion about someone who's a shaita, who's mentally retarded, about putting them in an institution where they're going to serve them non-kosher. So I printed it up over here, and I just wanted to go over it with you. The case that Rav Moshe, that someone asked Rav Moshe, someone from Toronto, a rabbi in Toronto, sent this question to Rav Moshe Feinstein. He had a situation where there's a father that has it's not so well. The father has a heart condition, and he doesn't have the strength to take care of his daughter, who is considered a shaita, who's mentally retarded, and she's 11 years old. And it's dangerous for him really to take care of her, because he's not so well himself. So he wants to know if it's permissible to put her into an institution that deals with these type of people, these type of individuals, special needs children, and there they will feed her prohibited foods. So Reb Moshe brings a tshuva from the Chassam Sofer. He brings this responsa from the Chassam Sofer that says that regarding putting someone in an institution of Goyim, that is not considered like you're feeding them physically. In other words, what the Chassam Sofer is talking about is that you cannot go and feed your child non-kosher. Be a terrible sin of chinuch. But putting someone in an institution is not called feeding them. In other words, this was the subject of what the question, this is like the basis of the question. Is that called feeding the person physically non-kosher? Or is it you put him in an institution and the institution ends up feeding him non-kosher? Is that called you're doing it? So the Chassam Sofer Paskin, he gave this verdict that the fact that you put a person into a institution, it's not called ma'achiloi biyadayim. It's not like and therefore what you did is not really usher. It's not, you can't say it's prohibited, because you didn't transgress chinuch by putting this person in an institution that's feeding them non-kosher. Now, the Chassam Sofer later, he has another issue with this, but the actual prohibition of feeding someone non-kosher, in other words, is this really considered like feeding someone non-kosher? Interestingly enough, he holds that it's not an issue. This is not the issue. There is another issue with doing this, but it's not transgressing the mitzvah of chinuch, which would be feeding a child something that's non-kosher. That wouldn't be the problem here. Surprising that he says that. You would think that this would be totally usher. You're putting them in the hands of a non-Jewish institution where they're going to feed them non-kosher. That is you're not considered like you fed him non-kosher by doing that. Now, the Chassam Sofer says in his responsa to whoever asked him this similar type of question. Again, it's not the same case. The response of the Chassam Sofer was a story, in Europe, in Pressburg, and this story of Reb Moshe is somewhere from Toronto. Two separate stories, but we don't know the exact details of the story there. But but we do know a few details, and Reb Moshe goes into these details because the case of the Chassam Sofer, the Chassam Sofer says, but when the child reaches the age of bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, you need to take the child out. That was the Chassam Sofer's ruling. When the child reaches bar mitzvah, you have to take him out. So Reb Moshe is wondering, would that apply in my case as well, where this girl is 11? Would we have to take her out at the age of 12? Because the Chassam Sofer said that you got to take this child out. So Reb Moshe says, no, that case was very different. That case was not a full-fledged mental retardation. That was a case where a person was called Pesi B'Yoser, very low IQ, but not fully retarded. And because of that, so it says a daitoi kalishta, very slow, very special needs, definitely a serious level of special needs, but not the full-fledged, not the real case of mental retardation. And because of that, what they do there is they actually teach the child to get more knowledgeable, and they reach different stages, and they try to bring the child up to a level where they might be able to live a semi-normal life. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I'm thinking it reminds me of a person that is raised by Goyim. And we said if he was raised by Goyim, it's not his fault, so he didn't do a sin. And here the case where the father cannot handle it, he's not at fault, and the child wouldn't be at fault because the Goyim are feeding him what they're feeding him.
Right. Right. Now, obviously, it would be ideal to find a Jewish family to pay them, or to, but there wasn't such an option. This is not a easy situation to find someone or to hire someone to take care of her. Obviously, he didn't have the money to hire someone to take care of her, and so here it's a complicated situation because he's really can't handle her, and it's dangerous for his health. Now, the case of the Chassam Sofer was that the person was not completely retarded, and the goal was that the person is going to ultimately get better. In other words, they're gonna be in a special needs program, but that special needs program is going to rehabilitate and going to give enough therapy that this person will ultimately reach new levels of understanding and abilities, and be able to possibly live a semi-decent life. So so in that case, the person is not really called a shoita, a mentally retarded person. He's called a pesi b'yoser, someone who's very, very limited, very mentally. There must be some term, some type of limitation.
Mentally deficient.
Deficient. Okay, that's a good word. That's a good word. So in such a case, Rav Moshe says that he's chayiv in mitzvahs. He's really obligated in mitzvahs because he's not, he has the deficiency, but he's not fully retarded. That person would be chayiv in mitzvahs. But a shoita mamish, someone who's really retarded, there's no difference if they're older or younger, whether they're after bar mitzvah or below bar mitzvah, because even someone who's above bar mitzvah is still exempt from mitzvahs. Like the Chassam Sofer himself says about a shoita is worse than a katan, and he gives some example. So ultimately, the Chassam Sofer wants to say that in the case where the Rav Moshe wants to say that in the case of the Chassam Sofer, there was an issue with keeping that person in this institution after bar mitzvah, but in the case of Rav Moshe, the case of Rav Moshe, where the person is mentally retarded, there it wouldn't make a difference. The person is totally exempt from mitzvahs, and it wouldn't be an issue of keeping the person there even after bar mitzvah. Now, so what Rav Moshe is basically telling this Rav of Toronto that he can putting the person in the institution should be fine, and even keeping them there even after the bas mitzvah. Now, the only issue is what the Chassam Sofer concludes, and this is something that David brought up yesterday, that this is from the letter of the law, but we know that there is a timtum halev, which means the stuffing up of the heart, which causes a person to have a bad nature. In other words, when a person eats non-kosher, it has an effect on them, and it has an effect on their actions. Now, it doesn't mean someone who eats kosher is going to be always righteous and always going to do the right thing, but someone who eats non-kosher, it makes it easier for them to have in their nature to be more mean or more cruel or do to sin, and it's considered almost like causing by eating non-kosher, it could cause the person to have a bad nature, tevara. So how could we tell you to feed this person non-kosher, to allow them to put them in an institution, if we know that it's going to cause this child to ultimately have a bad nature? Better the person should not go to this institution. Maybe this is what the Chassam Sofer is saying about the case of the person who's going to go to this institution to ultimately become knowledgeable, be able to live maybe a normal life or a semi-normal life. That we're putting him through this into this institution, and maybe they will get healed. But is it worth it? Better they should be a shaita all their life instead of being a rasha for one moment. Maybe they should be a shaita all their life and not learn how to live a decent life, not become educated in their having this therapy. Maybe better they shouldn't have this therapy, and they'll stay in their mental state, and at least they won't be a rasha even one moment. So on this, Rav Moshe, the Chassam Sofer deals with this problem. But Rav Moshe says, but in our case, we don't have this issue. That was an issue. The Chassam Sofer's case, it was a serious issue. But he says in our case, where this girl is totally retarded, and And naturally, according to the rules of nature, this girl is not going to get healed, and she's never going to be obligated in mitzvahs. So we don't have to worry that she might become, if she eats this non-kosher, she'll end up doing a sin, because she is not going to sin because she's exempt from mitzvahs. So she'll never be called a rasha, a wicked person before Hashem. So therefore, we don't have to worry about the timtum halev. Timtum halev will cause someone. Timtum halev means the coarse, the thickness of the stuffing up of the heart, which means spiritually becoming a coarse person and sinning. And this we don't have to worry about, because this girl is basically, according to the laws of nature, she's not going to get healed. The other case of the Chassam Sofer was a case where the person will get better to some extent, or maybe completely, and reach a level where they're normal. But here, this person is not according to the laws of nature, will not get healed. And if Hashem makes a miracle that he heals this girl who's mentally retarded, he says a very interesting line. He says, Hashem is not going to make a miracle to make more wicked people in the world. If he's going to make a miracle and heal this girl who's mentally retarded, he'll for sure remove any timtum halev, because he's not going to make a miracle that's going to add more wicked people. So if he's going to make a miracle, he'll make a miracle with that as well, and make sure her heart will not be stuffed. Or he'll heal her only on the condition, in a situation where her heart is not stuffed up, meaning in grub, and that she would end up sinning, because he's not going to make a miracle to add wicked people to the world. And therefore, he says it would seem that this case should be permissible to put this girl in an institution, even though they serve non-kosher. Now, I have to emphasize that this whole law of Rav Moshe Feinstein does not exactly apply nowadays, because nowadays we do have institutions that are fully kosher. This law applied when it was written in 1963. And 1963, at that time, there weren't any institutions, at least or they lived in Toronto. In Toronto, there were no such institutions. But obviously, nowadays, things have changed, and there definitely are locations and places like in New York. There's numerous, there are locations where I think the organization called OHEL helps out with these type of situations and so on. And you wouldn't have this heter, this permission to go and put someone in a goyish institution necessarily. I mean, unless there was a certain circumstance that required it. But under normal circumstances, that we do have institutions that are kosher. But here, Rav Moshe wants to permit, and he's not worried about the timtum halev. Interestingly enough, I think this is a very interesting response of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Yes, Yisrael.
My question is, did Rav Moshe say anything about who makes the determination of the status of the individual prospectively to be institutionalized?
So, in other words, what level of retardation is the person?
Who makes that determination as to the absolute category of the prospective institutionalized person?
So what it seemed like here was based on, do the doctors believe that this person will be able to get better or not? That was one of the factors that Rav Moshe is taking into consideration. So it seems like if the laws of nature expect this person to be able to be with therapy to reach a normal level where they would not be called a shoita, where they would not be called mentally retarded anymore. In other words, there are certain people that are slow. But they could be educated to some, different levels of being able to live a normal life. They know how to count their change. If they go buy something, they know if they got cheated or not. They know how to make. They know how to make decisions and do things and live a somewhat normal life. So these matters would be you would rely on if the doctors believe that this person could reach such a level or not. So it would be based on what the what the doctors feel is. But the other issue would be what the doctors feel in the case of the father being able to handle the child. That would be the father's doctor saying that he has a heart condition and he can't handle any stress. So that would be something that would be dependent on the father's situation as well. If the parents can handle this or they can't handle it. And are there institutions that are Jewish that this person would fit into? So these are all equations. Did I answer your question?
Well, my question was a little more specific in that the Chassam Sofer or Rav Moshe, did they clarify in their responses that there had to be a medical professional be involved in the ultimate decision and categorization?
Yeah, so he doesn't really say it so clearly. He says, "Shalafi derech hateva loisis rape." According to the laws of nature, this person will not be healed ever.
Rebbe,
so
I would think the first thing they do is take all the medical information. The Rav would listen to, under your medical expertise, would this person yes or no, and then do the halachic decision. But they would always first bring in the best medical testimony they can.
Which would mean they would rely on the doctors.
Right.
I guess my point
to a point, to the physical
a family
point.
member of such a person, okay, just for convenience, might want to move the slow person into an institution, but the person would not be allowed to halachically unless there was a medical professional involved. So that was the essence of my question,
right?
To make sure that there was a proper process to make that ultimate determination.
That's right. So you're talking more from the parents' side. Is this person, do they really need to put the person in an institution?
Right.
And that's definitely a very strong question, because from this actual responsa, we don't really see what the Chassam Sofer concluded in the end. All we see was that on the one hand, the halachic issue of feeding someone non-kosher was not the problem, but the main problem that we see that the Chassam Sofer had to deal with was the Timtum Halev issue, and that was an issue. So what comes out from that is it sounds like he might have prohibited them in the first place from putting this person in an institution. And he also said that type of situation, you have to take the person out once they reach bar mitzvah. So the Chassam Sofer seemed to be very strict in this scenario with regard to the final ruling, even though he exempted the person with regard to feeding non-kosher. That wasn't really the issue, but the Timtum Halev was the issue, to the extent that he said you have to take the person out after they reach bar mitzvah for both reasons. Number one, Timtum Halev, and number two, the person is now obligated in mitzvahs as an adult, and you can't just let them eat non-kosher. So now they'll be an adult. They're going to be there. So there were two issues that the Chassam Sofer was dealing with, and it definitely seems like a very complicated thing to be able to to permit putting someone in an institution. that's non-kosher. Again, nowadays it might not apply, so which would mean that your question wouldn't be so practical always, because there are so many facilities that are kosher. So then you don't need a heter to put someone in a facility. If there are kosher facilities, you're not doing anything really wrong by putting them in a facility. You might want to find out, if this is the best for the best interest of your family and for this child. That might be an issue, but that would be more of a, I guess, a therapist issue or a counseling. You'd want to get some advice ask advice from someone. They would ask advice, find out from other people their experiences and so on. But with regard to halacha, putting someone in an institution, you're right. It would, in these type of cases, like he had to explain himself that he's very sick. He can't handle stress. So this was the heter of even thinking about this, was the fact that the father is not well. Now, Ramesha does jump into that even further. He says, now it depends on how dangerously ill the father is, because if the father is very dangerously ill, then it's called pikuach nefesh. I mean, it's life and death. If it's life and death, then of course you can't give up your life just because you don't want your child to be eating non-kosher. If it's a life and death situation, you have no choice. So life and death would override putting someone's child in an institution, because life and death, everything is pushed aside for life and death. Definitely kosher is pushed aside for a life and death issue. So if the father was, about to have a heart attack, and he has a crazy high blood pressure, over 200, or something like that, and he's really borderline on a heart attack. There would be no question. Ramesha says that even if they're feeding the child non-kosher in the first place and whatever, it's not a shiloh at all. Even if it would be considered that you're feeding the child non-kosher. And for sure, according to what the Sam Sefer says, that's not an issue here. Now, the Ramesha then goes into another issue that, and I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how these things work, but somehow they're nervous that this girl she's showing desire to have relations, and they want to cause her to be sterile. That's a proper term for a female. Would that be a?
Yeah.
You use that term, yeah. So they wanted the doctors say they want to be masares her, and because they say it's not good for her health. Just 1 second.
Did we lose him?
No, he had to answer somebody.
Okay, sorry about that. So Ramesha deals with this issue where they also want to do something that's prohibited, because a person is not allowed to, even an animal, you're not allowed to make sterile. And so a person, there's an argument if it's for a woman, is it a biblical prohibition or is it a rabbinic prohibition? Ramesha deals with this as well, and it seems like people that are mentally retarded, the others take advantage of them, and because of that, this was another issue that they had to deal with in an institution, especially because the person's in the institution. It causes them to have less, protection from outsiders, from others, because all the people in the institution, the other people there could take advantage of them. And so Ramesha wants to say that it's prohibited if it's only just that something is good for her health. It wouldn't allow us to transgress this prohibition. And now I don't know exactly what that means. It's good for her health, that she doesn't maybe that she doesn't catch some type of a sexually transmitted disease. Would that be the issue, or just simply if she gets pregnant? I guess it must mean if she would get pregnant, that would be dangerous for her health, someone who's mentally
Must be
retarded.
both.
But just making her sterile is not going to stop her from having relations. People will still take advantage.
Not maybe they call it castration then. I don't know.
Okay, castration. What would that do? She wouldn't be able to have relations if she was castrated. Is that a term with a female, castrated?
I don't
No,
know.
Anyway,
that's a term for males. That's a term for males.
That's not the word. So it's sterile.
No.
So
Yeah.
She can
So
still
what
have
would-
relations. She just
Yeah,
don't have
so-
children.
So she still would be able to catch a sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess it's just the fact that they shouldn't be pregnant. So it's not healthy for her to be pregnant. So Ramesha says if it's not a sakana, you can't make her sterile. Not only according to the Gra that it's biblically prohibited to make her sterile, he says even according to the other opinions that it's only rabbinic. You can't just permit a rabbinic law just because it's there's a need for her health, that it's benefiting her health. But unless it was a sakana, obviously, unless it's but he says, but there is a different issue that people shouldn't be noiheg with her a minag hefker, that people shouldn't act with her as if she's free to use, he said, just like it's permitted to free a slave that people were taking advantage of and having relations with her. So he says that because freeing a slave is a iser zuta, a small prohibition, and in order that other people don't have relations with her, it would be better to free her, do that small sin in order not to cause others to do this big sin of being mizana, having relations with her. Now, so here also,
always a danger in pregnancy. There's always a danger to the woman's life.
No, this has nothing to do with the danger of pregnancy. It has to do with the danger somehow being that she is mentally retarded. There seems like it could cause, it's not really healthy for such a person to have a child. I'm not exactly sure what that means, why not, but it probably has something to do with the fact that she's not able to, probably take care of her body when she's pregnant or but he says that you wouldn't be allowed to make her sterile, but unless only because of this other reason that people are gonna, she's gonna be like a source of being a hefker, a person free, a free female, and because of that, then you should have a non-Jew make her sterile. It should be done by a non-Jewish doctor, and that, for that situation. But he says this is only in a case where she doesn't have anyone protecting her. But if she doesn't have good, if the facility doesn't have a good good staff. But anyway, so that's what he deals with. This is and he says it's it's not a simple heter. This is only when it's a danger for her health that if it's really a danger for her health, then you don't have a problem of making a wound in yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to make a wound in yourself. And just so that so because it's not good for her health, and in that case, it's not a problem making a wound in herself. So even though you have the issue of other people shouldn't sin with her, it only works if it's also not good for her health, and therefore only if the doctors say it's unhealthy for her, it comes out that this making her sterile will benefit her. That that even if it's not a sakon, even if it's not a dangerous like life and death, but you could allow through a non-Jewish doctor But this is only if the institution can protect her. If the institution is able to have enough security to protect her, they have enough people watching over there, then you shouldn't do this either. And that's how he ends.
Rabbi.
Okay, so that's the Igros Moshe. Yes.
I wanted to say in the institution they're giving the medications anyhow. Basically every day. All they have to do is add one more pill, and she will not get pregnant.
So that sounds
have
good.
To be sterilized. She can do it by taking a pill every day. That's all.
So I think the reason they probably didn't want to do that is because
they
those
didn't
pills,
have the pill at that time.
That might be, but I also think that those methods are not 100%.
I think they are.
Okay. All right.
Anyhow.
Maybe.
Today is different than yesterday. That's
right. Definitely there are new things coming out, but whatever. From my understanding, these things are not absolute. And maybe this is more absolute. Now, I don't know if making her sterile also makes her not have desire.
Still going
sin.
out.
That might be another.
That's another pill.
That's another thing, or maybe that's another pill, maybe. But in any event, that's what Rabbi Moshe was dealing with in this tshuva in Orach Chaim chapter. His tshuva was 88. Tshuva 88 in Orach Chaim, second volume of Rabbi Moshe. Okay, so anyway, that touches on what we were dealing with earlier about someone who's a cheresh shoitev akatan. A cheresh was someone who's deaf and mute, and basically doesn't have das, doesn't have knowledge or shoitev. So this is one of those cases that they're pater mikol mitzvahs amuris b'Torah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be put in an institution and only under certain circumstances. And in that case that Rabbi Moshe was asked, the father was extremely sick, and then even though the institution is serving non-kosher, some Sefer says it's not a problem, but there is a problem of timtum alev, and there's a problem after bar. There could be a problem of the person is not completely mentally retarded, and so these are the issues that are dealt with. Okay, so getting back to our Gemara, we just learned this Gemara about the person who's cheresh in one ear, that he would be exempt from re'iyah, and now we have the next Gemara. Amar Reb Tanchum says chiger b'ragla yachas patur min re'iyah. A person who is a chiger, who is lame in one foot, is exempt from re'iyah, is exempt from going to the Beis Hamikdash. Shenemar, as it says, regalim, feet. Now, regalim, of course, doesn't really mean feet in this case. The word regalim, shalish regalim, means the three holidays, the 3 times a year. It literally means the 3 times a year that you go shalish pa'amim, 3 times a year you go to the Beis Hamikdash. But the fact is, it uses the word regalim, and so we learn from there that it means that person has to have both feet, and if one of the feet is not working, means they're lame, so it would be he would be exempt from re'iyah, from going to the Beis Hamikdash. Gemara asks, doesn't regalim, when it says regalim, doesn't that exempt someone who has a leg that's amputated? And he's called a Baal Kabin. A kab, it means a stump that they would put on his they would put his
thesis on the stump.
They would put his whatever. This is what they would do. They would put his the piece of leg that he has. They would stick it into a hole in a stump. So they would hollow out a stump, just exactly the size of his remaining leg, whatever is remaining, and they would stick it in very tight, and he would use the stump as a foot. The stump would be a foot. So the Gemara understands that when it says regalim, that excludes someone who has a stump for a foot. He has a prosthetic foot. That would be considered a Rashi says, of course, they would put the cotton in it and make it more comfortable or whatever. But that would be an exemption from being oila regel. So the person would be exempt from going to the Beit Hamikdash, a person who's a amputee. So you learn that from regalim. So how could you learn someone who's lame from regalim? So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers no. Humi pa'amim nafka. That is learned from the word pa'amim. That pa'amim it teaches that that such a person would be exempt from being oila regel. Now the Gemara says the Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, pa'amim says pa'amim, and ein pa'amim ela regalim, but pa'amim means the regalim, and where do we see that? It says termasna regel raglei ani pa'amei dalim, that it says trampled with the foot of a poor person, or pa'amei dalim, the feet of the leg of poor people. So it uses that term pa'amim to mean the regel, the foot. Now the Gemara says, or the leg, I should say. Now the Gemara says that v'chein hu omer termasna regel v'omer mayafu pa'amecha bana olim bas nediv, and it also says that pa'amecha bana olim. It has a verse here that it mentions that your pa'amecha are in shoes, your feet are in shoes, and what do we see from there? That pa'amim is connected to having shoes, and this person who has a wooden leg, he doesn't have shoes, and therefore he would be exempt. So that's the Gemara's conclusion, that the person who is an amputee is exempt, and a person is exempt from pa'amim, and a person who is lame would be exempt because it says the word that it says is regalim. So we have these two words, and that we exempt them. We exempt these two situations. Shalish pa'amim bashana yirok hozaforcha. So it does say the word pa'amim, and it says regalim. So we learn both of these laws out of these two things. Now the Gemara continues and says that Darash Rava Darshan, my dechsiv, what does it mean, the pasuk, that it says, Mayafu pa'amecha bana olim bas nediv, that how beautiful are your feet in the shoes, the daughter of the contributor, or the giver. So what does that pasuk mean? It's a pasuk in Shir HaShirim. So the Gemara says, so Rava says,
Rabbi,
yes.
Isn't Nedivim mean something else? For example, in the Hallel, Nedivim.
What do you think it means?
I thought perhaps it might mean someone who's, upper class, highly placed.
Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right.
No. In Steinsaltz, it says a prince.
Prince. Okay, I guess you're right, Ezra. Okay, thank you. So the only thing is we're going to translate it here to mean the div, that it means that he contributes, but maybe the original meaning is like you said. Okay, so so it says that what does this pasuk refer to? So it says that Kama Noin Raglein Shal Yisrael, how beautiful are the feet of Klal Yisrael, B'Shosh Oilam LaRegel, when they go up to be Oilam Regel, Bas Nadiv, they are connected to the Nadiv, to the contributor, which means that you're the daughter of Avram Avinu, who's called Nadiv, who's called the contributor Shenemer, as it says, Nadive Amim Neasafu Am Alakei Avraham, the Nadiv, the Nadiv of nations, those that are Megayer, those that convert, to accept the mitzvahs, gather together. Am Alakei Avram, this is the nation of the God of Avraham. So basically, Avram is called a Nadiv, and when a person, when they go up to be Oilah Regel, so they are, how beautiful are the feet of the daughters of the Nadiv, means that they are considered the children of Avram Avinu, that he contributed his heart to recognize Hashem, and Nadivei Amim are all the Gerim that are Menadev, that they are contribute to between the nations to accept the yoke of mitzvah. So we're translating it more in the contributing term of Nadiv, like Nadava, but that doesn't mean that that's not the original, the literal translation is could be a prince. That's fine. Now, oh boy, it's 11 o'clock. Okay, so we're going to stop here, and to be continued. That's Hashem. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good day, everybody.
Okay.